Mhm. Mhm.
Credits! I love motion pictures!
But I decided she
Mm-mm. Mhm.
And Seuss takes us to all of those places. The good doctor fighting for bemused humanity with the style which he dubbed logical insanity. He wrote in verse called Animalistic Tribune and used words like dark, sands, and Jacksonfeeder. He also used smugulous, crapulous schlub, snarkle, jaboo, soft, warmth, and yuck. He wrote about snooze blues, not the reasons that the natters, nutmegs, and of course ring the gag. He took readers to places that only he knew, like Gecko and Whoville and Sala Saloon. He was coming back from a trip. In the middle of the night when he couldn't sleep, the ship was tossing up and down. The engines were grinding into his mind. And it was the rhythm of the ship tossing up and down that he couldn't get out of his head, which some say created that certain pattern of rhyme. And he eventually wrote the book, And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street. And that was the start of it.
Say, that makes a story that no one can beat. When I say I saw it on Mulberry Street.
When Dr. Seuss's books first started coming out, people noticed that they were different from anybody else's books. Well, they were incredibly funny.
Now.
But how did the Grinch end up on TV? Well, that's a good question. Just listen to me. Seuss had a friend who was exceedingly funny, who directed cartoons for Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny. Let's make Grinch a cartoon, Jones often would plead, until finally one day Dr. Seuss, he agreed.
The book was made into a TV special in 1966. Chuck Jones was working at MGM at the time, and they were making it as a holiday special with Dr. Seuss's involvement.
Dr. Seuss had known the animator Chuck Jones during World War II.
They had both worked together in a unit that was doing a series of morale films for soldiers, which kind of lampooned Army life, called Private Snafu. Jones was the director of many of those shorts, and Dr. Seuss was the writer. There was one Snafu cartoon called Rumors that I believe he did a lot of design work on and contributed a lot of crazy-looking creatures, kind of like the ones over there.
And I think it was two minds of a similar kind that saw kind of upbeat way of thinking, a sideways look at things.
Seuss himself wrote the script and even expanded it in a few places. Because you're dealing with a book that can be told in a very short amount of time, and you've got about 25 minutes to fill, you're going to have to extend the length a little bit, such as when the Grinch is complaining about all the noise that the girls and boys are going to make from their presents, we actually see them opening their gifts, and they're running down and they're wagging their pantumas, and they're got their snoof bloopers and pantukas, and so Jones was able to animate the kids doing all that, and you can actually see how the noise would have driven the Grinch crazy.
My favorite part is when he's like saying, noise, noise, noise.
Chuck Jones did a fantastic job of taking Seuss's two-dimensional book and taking it into a completely different medium.
The drawings are sketches, really, and when you get to animating, you have to do things like, how does the Grinch move? I mean, he's a sketch in a book. What are his gestures? Is he confident? Is he shy?
Chuck Jones was working with artists that he worked on with the original Looney Tunes team, and they were so wonderful at capturing a character's emotions just through their facial reactions, their body language. Like when the top of his little Santa hat goes boom, like that. That's masterful. Jones was famous for doing that.
He smile.
One of the best facial reactions Jones has ever drawn anywhere is when the Grinch gets his idea. Then he got an idea.
The paper on that drawing board and create something that allowed the rest of us to get in ink. The pencil, the paper on. He could take the pencil, the paper on that drawing board and create something that allowed the rest of us to get inside that imagination and become and see a part of this extraordinary world.
Then he slithered and sloped with a smile most unpleasant. Around the whole room he took every present.
Seuss always had the ability to connect with his own child inside, and children that read his books connect with that.
Dr. Seuss rhymes words, so he can make the book pretty funny. It's thumping, a bumping, a wild, alive scratching. My egg, shouted Hornet. My egg! Why is it hatching? Oh, I love that part.
These were stories that amused him, that of course he knew that children read them and loved them. But he said, write what seems to appeal, be amusing to you, and you hope they like it.
And their shrieks, squeaks, and squeals racing round on their wheels. Then dance with jing tinglers tied onto their heels.
Seuss was always asked, where do you get your ideas? And he hated that question so much, he came up with an answer. And his ideas came out of Kwmrgrinch. And that's a town outside of Switzerland, I believe, where he would go every year to have his cuckoo clock fixed. And while the clock was being fixed, he would mingle among the townspeople, and they would give him his ideas. And you never really knew if Seuss was telling the truth or not, because he hated straight answers.
The fantastical places we one day applaud were based upon Seuss's own trip abroad. Journeys exposed
No.
sorts of creatures in his books took on.
You've seen things that are sort of like that,
No.
but not exactly like that. I think that's where Seuss was a real magician, was that he would take elements of real animals and combine them in such a way that he had his a completely brand new zoology going on in there.
No.
When you think of 53,
But for 53 years,
No.
we're not in it now. I must
In 5 minutes.
Christmas from coming. But how?
Seuss was the Grinch in some
In
ways.
5
It
minutes.
was part of his alter ego.
Where he lives in La Jolla looks very much like where the Grinch lived. And to get to Dr. Seuss's house, you have to take a winding road up a hill. And when you reach the top of that hill, there's this old tower. And it reminds you of the peak where the Grinch lives.
Now, the Grinch lives on Mount Crumpet. Ted's on Mount Soledad. It's got to be one and the same. He's got to be thinking, God, here comes Christmas again, and La Jolla's just going to go crazy, and all the commercialism and all the hoo-ha, and he's up there being grumpy.
Yeah, he has two sides, but the nice side is shy. I think the Grinch could be a bad person, sometimes a good person.
I think there's fun seeing the Grinch get irritated with Christmas, which we all do once in a while.
What Dr. Seuss did with the Grinch is he basically took the same format.
The fantastical places we one day applaud were based upon Seuss's own trips abroad. His journeys exposed him to all sorts of creatures, which in his books took on bizarrical features. From emu to meerkat, from ostrich to finch, influenced all Seuss books. My favorite, The Grinch.
Seuss traveled to over 30 countries by the time he was 30 years old. He loved travel, and he went to Europe, and he went to South America, and all over the place. He didn't take photographs, but he did like to sketch along the way. And he came up with some of his ideas while on vacation.
He would take things from
Long before The Grinch was a TV sensation, the story was more of a bookish persuasion. With the Christmas tree up and the stockings all hung, this tale would be told by the old to the young. So break out your cazoozles and give it a cheer, for 2007 is the book's 50th year. To have the Grinch on Christmas would give us a look, but somebody wrote and drew pictures to boot. For his real name, Ted Geisel, he just had no use. You know him much better as the good Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss was born, Theodore Geisel, in 1904 in a small town, Springfield, Massachusetts. And the main thing that I think is so interesting about Dr. Seuss is that he wasn't born Dr. Seuss. It was a long process of him finding that identity.
I think Dr. Seuss is the cat in the hat. I think Dr. Seuss is a rhymer. I think Dr. Seuss is a writer and an illustrator.
His mother, Henrietta Seuss, always wanted her son to be a doctor. That was her biggest goal. She wanted him to be Dr. Geisel. When it came time for him to publish his books, he wanted to get that doctor sound that his mother had liked. And he also used her maiden name, Seuss. When he was little, he started doodling and drawing on everything. He was actually voted by his college class least likely to succeed because they said, a man can't exactly doodle for a living.
In his first art class, he was holding the artwork upside down and looking at it for composition reasons.
Teaser.
How the noise would have driven the Grinch crazy.
My favorite part is when he's like saying, noise, noise, noise.
Chuck Jones did a fantastic job of taking Seuss's two-dimensional book and taking it into a completely different medium.
the drawings are sketches, really, and when you get to animating, you have to do things like, how does the Grinch move? I mean, he's a sketch in a book. What are his gestures? Is he confident? Is he shy?
Chuck Jones was working with artists that he worked on with the original Looney Tunes team, and they were so wonderful at capturing a character's emotions just through their facial reactions and their body language. Like when the top of his little Santa hat goes like that. That's masterful. Jones was famous for doing that.
Here. Give me a smile. Oh.
One of the best facial reactions Jones has ever drawn anywhere is when the Grinch gets his idea. Then he got an idea, an awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea.
Dr. Seuss thought, especially the smile, looked a little bit too much like Chuck. So there were a lot of sparks that flew between two creative geniuses, but it was wonderful because it
Grinch finally learns when his brain gets smart that Christmas